This candidature is not a candidature for circumstances. It's a candidature for duty. My whole career, my whole life, indeed, I have been involved in Pan-African activities. Since my student years, as also trade unionist, as youth leader in my country, Senegal, and later on as a teacher, as a researcher, but also member of government, member of parliament, and again as a special envoy of the African Union, as special representative of the United Nations Secretary General in different parts of Africa. I have accumulated, I think, enough experience and knowledge of the continent. And with out of my conviction, I think it is time to put all this experience and knowledge at the disposal of the continent, so that the young people will have new hope for Africa, to give my contribution to the revival of Pan-Africanist ideas. Africa is facing numerous challenges today, which are of importance for the people of Africa. And across the continent, the citizens, the young people, the women, think that the African Union should be revived to be able to face those challenges. So in my vision is to revive Pan-Africanism, accelerating regional integration, not only at sub-regional level, but also at continental level, but also giving hope to the young people through economic development, to enable the young people to have access to jobs, women to end to discrimination we are suffering throughout the continent, but also, more importantly, to establish peace in Africa. You know, we have one of the motto of the African Union is to silence the gun by 2020, which means that we have at the helm of the African Union to accelerate the peace process on the continent. And this, throughout my career, I have been personally involved in peace processes not only in West Africa, but in East Africa, in Southern Africa, in Central Africa. And with that experience, I hope I will be able to make a difference, to make a contribution, a positive contribution in this regard. There are other issues. When I talked about reviving Pan-African ideal, reviving the African Union itself, there is a need for reform of the African Union, not only in terms of its structures, in terms of its financing. You know, the African Union is dependent on outside world, on partners for almost 80% of its budget, program and functioning. And this cannot continue. There are the agenda of reform, which is currently being conducted by President Kagame under the leadership of the head of state and government. I would see to it that those reforms and other I could initiate also can be implemented, because the issue is implementation of decisions the head of states are making. There are a number of other issues to connect with the diaspora. This is very important. Africa has an important diaspora population throughout history, since the slave trade, the colonial days, and the contemporary diaspora. We have to link to make the African Union relevant to the diaspora also, African diasporas. There is also a necessity for the African Union to be relevant, as I said, to all stakeholders on the continent, the private sector, the professional organization, for instance, you as communication specialists, journalists, other opinion leaders, religious leaders, cultural groups, but also researchers, scientists, so that all those groups, all those stakeholders will contribute by their thinking, by their proposals to the revival of the African Union and to inspire the work of the Commission, so that the Commission would not be regarded as much as the Commission for the head of state and government, but a commission relevant to the real people of Africa.
I would really like to know how you tend to go about these things that you have mentioned, particularly considering the peculiarities in different African countries.
Well, you know, I have a long political experience. I was involved in politics in my country since at a young age, through underground activities, and we fought. I was at the forefront of all the battles, political battles, fought in Senegal for democracy. And with this experience, learning experience, interacting not only with political leaders, but with social leaders, with cultural leaders, with religious leaders, I think I can have a convening power with the African leadership at different levels to convince them that there is something to be done, but so that the continent will move forward. So I would use pedagogy, persuasion, my experience, my knowledge, my connections with stakeholders all over the continent, because I don't regard myself as a Senegalese as such. Although I have Senegalese citizenship, I don't regard myself as a citizen of ECOWAS, although I am of ECOWAS. I have served, for instance, at ECOWAS Parliament for 5 years term. But I regard myself first and foremost as an African citizen. And this I have shown it throughout my career at different levels and different fronts. So I think with that position, I can be able to assure the leadership of the continent to move forward. But it is true that after the founding fathers and mothers of the African Union, recently there has been a kind of slowdown in the process of the Pan-African development of Pan-African ideas. But what I have noticed is that the young people really aspire to it. And although even if the leaders, some of them are really committed, if those who are not committed should be persuaded to get on board, because there is no other alternative for Africa than to unite, as Kwame Nkrumah rightly said. To unite, our late good friend Tajuddin Abdurrahim used to say, don't agonize, organize. So we have to organize, we have to persuade people to do it. And today, Africa is facing so many challenges both from within and from without. But if we are to become a people full of restored in its dignity, we have to opt for Pan-Africanism without any reservation.
Okay, let me just ask you this too. I'm a young person and I'm an African too. How do you intend to involve young Africans in the large scope of African politics? Because, I mean, the average African leader, the average age of an African leader today is about 70 something. So how do you intend to involve young people in African politics?
Well, I think that it takes the leadership to really take measures, not only through discourse, but also concretely speaking, in terms of policies, education policy, which must come together to put in place a new education system in Africa, which will be relevant to the situation of young people today. A new economic policy, as I said, regional integration to be accelerated. I usually say that so far the African history has been driven by what I call the Berlin syndrome. As you know, I am a historian by profession. In 1885, the European powers met in Berlin to share the African continent among themselves. Colonies were established, Africa was balkanized, not only balkanized politically, but economically. We were producer and exporters of raw materials since the colonial days. Up until now, this is very much the situation in Africa. And even with the new partners we have, from Asia, from other part of the world, it is the same dynamic which is continuing. So we have to make the African economy relevant to the aspirations of the young people who need jobs on a sustainable manner, not only through some small-scale activities here and there, but on a sustainable manner. That is to say, to go for full-scale industrialization, transformation of the economy, transformation of the technological base of our economy. Well, yes, as you said, the African Union is supposed to be the sort of power engine to drive the economic integration through the pillars, which are the regional blocks. For instance, ECOWAS is one of them, COMESA is one of them, ECAS is one of them, Economic Community of Central Africa, SADC is one of them. So how to get those regional, sub-regional economic blocks to work together under the guidance and the inspiration of a commission. This is the challenge which I wanted to consider. Well, the women are the majority of the population. When we talk about development, regional integration, developing the economy, reconsidering the whole social transformation agenda, it's up with women. We cannot do it for women, but with women. They are at the heart of the policy. Therefore, those women today, unfortunately, they are subject of so many discriminations, old and new discrimination, from both from our traditional society and our modern society. Therefore, the issue is to transform the African society with women as the main instrument for those transformation.
Okay.
In terms of education, in terms of culture, in terms of political participation, in terms of equality of right, equality of not only at workplace but also in the household. So these are some main issues, and of course, women as mother, how to make their life better. This transformation is important, and I think it is one of the key issues the Commission should deal with. As I said earlier, the work of the Commission so far is mostly inspired by the government and the different structures of government. As I said, we have to make the AU relevant to young people through concrete actions. And those concrete actions cannot be defined by the government without the young people. So the young people should be at the beginning and at the end of the policy-making process at the Commission level. Therefore, as I said, youth organizations should inspire the work of the Commission. And I see to it that an interactive system would be created, a constant dialogue between the young people and the Commission through mechanism we will design together. Because, you know, this transformation process of the African Union is not a Lone Star activity. I'm not a prophet to do everything. No, I want to create a conducive environment for dialogue between all the stakeholders of the African continent, including, of course, and the youth at the forefront. Yeah, the Pan-African commitment has been lacking to a large extent. This is why it gives the impression that Africa is absent on the world scene. You know, those days when Nkrumah speaks, Gamal Abdel Nasser speaks, Sékou Touré speaks, people will listen. Even recently. Right? But the problem is that we need a leadership which will take seriously the issues of the continent, to be able to argue with partners whom we are facing. As I said, the financing of the organization depends largely on external donors. They are giving us our money. How can you talk about independence, talk about sovereignty, when your organization is almost entirely financed by others? You can't do that. So it is high time that we become autonomous, independent. We go into what I call the second liberation, because independence is not just about the national anthem and the flag, the 54 flag of the continent. Independence is about what I call the second liberation. This second liberation is about economic independence. It's about dignity. It's about cultural autonomy, so that Africa will express its own identity at world scene. But just diaspora today look upon the continent to restore their own dignity. When you go to Latin America, all the black people who are there today, in the Caribbean, they look upon Africa. When Africa stands up and speaks with one voice, articulates its own position, along its own interests, this is of importance. It will give pride and dignity to the African people beyond the continent itself. So it is important today to have a leadership who can do that, who would not just go to the African Union, to Addis Ababa, to do business as usual, just for the machine to continue just to run. But even at the long run, the machine will just collapse. So we need a new leadership to pave the way for the younger generation and even for this generation. Well, me as a fighter for democracy for decades in my own country, I know the price. I went to prison 7 times for my political commitment, for my trade union commitment in trade union movement. And this is something I cherish really. Democracy is at the heart of the African situation today for the future. The African Union has ratified a number of protocols, including the protocol on good governance, protocol on elections and election and democracy. And I think once those protocols have been ratified, the most important thing is just not to shelve them, but to activate them, to make them relevant to the ordinary people. Because the young people, women, the African citizens, they want economic empowerment, they want economic integration, but this can only flourish if it goes along with democracy. Without democracy, there is no way we can do it. And of course, the freedom, individual freedom should be preserved. The access to political freedoms should be upheld. And also, when you look at the situation in Africa today, unfortunately, of course, the situation is different from one region to the other. There is an uneven development of the political situation. Level of democratization is more or less advanced from one region to the other, from one country to the other. But there is one thing which we might consider as the kernel of democracy, that is the right for the citizen to have free and fair election. When the incumbent loses, he should accept to step down and give way to those who win the election until next time. So I think this is something very important. This is why, unless we do that, we will move forward, backward. We would not move forward. And unfortunately, there are so many examples today. And also, when we talk about the necessity of preserving the freedoms, you see there is a lot of debate about the ICC and other considerations. For me, what is most important is this. After the Atlantic slave trade, the massacres of the African citizens during the colonial period in different countries, different colonies and regions. When we achieved independence, should we accept ourselves to carry on the same sort of massacres in our continent? For me, it is unacceptable. So we have to find mechanism where justice will prevail, where those who have been victimized will find the justice system to redress. I think it is very important. So for me, today, we cannot allow genocide to be repeated, massacres to be repeated. What is going on today? I just came from the Central Africa region as special representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations for 2.5 years. I've been there. I've seen how African people, some groups can behave in a more ruthless manners than the former colonial masters. Look, in Central Africa Republic, I was there. I presided the Bangui Forum in May 2015. When people came on the rostrum to say the massacres they have eyewitnessed or they have themselves committed. You go to Beni in in eastern DRC today, on a daily basis, people are massacred on the ground that they belong to this group or that group, be it ethnic, be it cultural, be it religious, etc. Those ruthless expression of violence cannot be tolerated, must not be tolerated anymore. So democracy, good governance is something extremely important. It is indispensable for the democratic process, for the economic progress on the continent. Well, this is a political and moral responsibility. I would like to commend the position taken last Saturday by the ECOWAS head of state and government to see to it that come the day of the transfer of power, the transition, President Yahya Jammeh would transfer the power to the president-elect Barrow. I hope so, because this is a duty not only for the sub-regional organization, which have taken the lead for that, and I commend it, and I will support that. But again, also at UN level, AU level, they did the same, and I also would support that. And the UN, because if this is not upheld, what can be the follow-up is the chaos in the Gambia, with all its consequences, not only for the people of the Gambia, but for the people of the sub-region and beyond. and even maybe world peace, as we have seen how some national crisis can erupt, be inflated, and take proportions of world dimension.
Okay, what really is your opinion about African leaders who do not want to leave power? They stay there 20 years, 30 years, and even more. What's your opinion on this kind of?
Well, this has something to do with what we said about respecting the protocol which have been signed by all. If we sign, we believe on our, and we respect our own signature, we should be able to really abide by it and accept, when comes election, to accept to be defeated and go and do something else, because life does not end with a presidency, with a state house. Life can continue and must continue. One of my favorite issue I want to talk about is about this the necessity to have, as I said, African corporation to create wealth, to invest and reinvest, so that we can transform the African economy. But when Africa continues to be inflicted such a hemorrhage in terms of financial outflow, how can we do it? Well, a number of examples have been, proposals have been made long time ago. Professor Adebayo Olukosu, he is present here, has participated in an audit exercise in 2007. They came up with a number of proposals, not only for the restructuring of the union, but also in terms of finance. Unfortunately, the finding of that audit commission has not been implemented. President Obasanjo has been tasked also to find, through a committee he set up, alternative sources of financing of the union. He came up with his conclusions in a report which has been shelved. Last year, the head of state of government, for the third time, has tasked President Kagame to do the same exercise. Of course, the former president of ADB, Donald Kaberuka, came up with a proposal that is to ask the African government to allow 0.2% of on the import, to tax 0.2% on the import outside Africa, so as to be able to finance the union, not only through its functioning, but also through the peace fund, to give a possibility for Africa to fund its peace activities on the continent, but also other programs and activities. We have to see to it, at least this time, this third time, those conclusions would not be just shared. So I have to steer the leadership really to abide by its commitment for the dignity of the continent,